Hi, we're going to talk about finding secondary sources on Westlaw. We're going to go over 4 different ways that you can do it. The first way is you can just type a search into the big box. For example, competency to make a will. And I can select my jurisdiction, or I can narrow it down by jurisdiction later, but I'm going to select my jurisdiction as Ohio and run the search. Okay, so over on the side, I can go to secondary sources. And this first one looks pretty good, so I'm going to click on it and open it up. And we see that secondary sources cite to a variety of cases, to statutes, all sorts of useful things. It summarizes the law for you. There is a table of contents over on the side here in case you want to take a look at other sections. You could do reading mode in Westlaw, which is going to put all the sections together so you can just scroll down and see all the sections that way. Or you can go to the next section in this book by just clicking on this green arrow, or by using the table of contents on the side here. So say I go back to my original search. I can narrow this search down by jurisdiction. It did give me national, federal, and secondary sources for states other than Ohio, so I can narrow it down to just Ohio. And I could narrow it to publication type, such as law review articles or restatements, texts and treatises. I'm going to pick texts and treatises. That's usually a pretty good place to start your research. And this also is going to include your encyclopedia sections as well, namely Ohio jurisprudence. And so if I apply those filters, it will narrow down my search. The next way that we're going to look at of how to find secondary sources is, if you know the name of a secondary source, you can just type it into the search bar. For example, American jurisprudence. It says looking for this, American jurisprudence, that's what I want. So I click on that and I'm in American jurisprudence. One way I could search American jurisprudence is it actually has the index on here. So some of your sources on Westlaw do have indexes. It's an alternative way of searching, especially if you're not real sure what words you want to search. So I could kind of scroll down on the index if I wanted to. I can search the index, sexual harassment. And I know I want a particular term dealing with sexual harassment, but I can't seem to remember what that term is. So I'm going to go, this one really wasn't helpful. So here I'm going to go to job discrimination, and I could just do Control F, or I could go search term and find where it says sexual harassment. And here I have some various sections on sexual harassment. And actually, the term I was trying to think of was hostile work environment as it pertains to sexual harassment. So this is the term that I really wanted to know about, hostile work environment, so I could jump to some sections about that right here. So another thing I could do with American jurisprudence is I could drill down on the table of contents here to try and find what I'm looking for. Or what I can do is I can select a certain area of the table of contents and search within that. So for example, I'm interested in employee duty of loyalty. So say if I scroll down here to employment relationship, I open that up, I see employee's duty to employer, and I just type in loyalty. And so I get some sections that may or may not be on point. This is actually looking pretty good. So, and then you see also we have the table of contents here on the side if we want to look at any other surrounding sections, if those look interesting to our issue. The third way to find secondary sources on Westlaw is to simply, from this browse widget right here, click on secondary sources. So from here, I'm just going to be searching secondary sources, nothing else on Westlaw, just secondary sources. So I could enter a search, and I could do maybe hearsay, exception, excited utterance. So I get results in various secondary sources. Again, I could limit to, say I'm in federal court. I want to limit this to federal, and I could limit to law reviews if I want, restatements, but I'm going to limit to text and treatises and do apply filters to narrow down my results. The last way that you could go about finding secondary sources is go to state materials or go to practice areas and drill down from there. For example, if I want some secondary sources for Ohio, so you could click on all secondary sources and say my issue is I'm trying to determine what is marital property in Ohio. So I would like to look at this domestic relations treatise. So I'm going to click on that and open it up. Or I could just search all secondary sources in Ohio. And if we just do what is marital property, and I'm going to limit these down to actually Ohio, the Baldwin's Ohio Practice Publications, and Ohio Jurisprudence. Okay, and here we go, marital property defined. Okay, and that's how you can use secondary sources and find secondary sources on Westlaw.